Today's game was played at the 1966 Chess Olympiad in Havana, Cuba. It was played between Grandmasters Bobby Fischer and Joaquim Durao. Bobby Fischer is playing the King's Indian attack here. This opening system was a favorite of Fischer's and has also been used by other grandmasters such as Nigel Davies. Queen to e2. Fischer wants to avoid trading the queens in order for a possible kingside attack later on in the game. e5, excellent move. This move clears space for the knight to get to e4, where it can head to either the great d6 or f6 outpost. a5 is actually a huge mistake here because it severely weakens the queenside pawns and is actually a contributing factor to black losing the game. As we can see here, the b5 square is also incredibly weak, and the b6 pawn is a backwards pawn. Also, if the b6 pawn, which is weak, were ever to be captured, then both the c5 and the a5 pawns would become isolated and would also be extremely weak, and most likely be captured as well. This pawn triangle formation you want to avoid because of the inherent weaknesses. However, we can look at this other pawn triangle formation on the king side, and we can see that it is quite strong. It is very strong because the centermost pawn on g6 is defended by both the h and the f pawn. Also, if, let's just say, maybe the h pawn is lost, well, that's completely fine because the pawn formation is still quite strong. The f pawn defends the g6 pawn, and neither pawn becomes isolated. So this pawn triangle formation over here on the king side is more flexible and can stand up much easier to various attacks. If one pawn falls, then the rest of the formation can still stay quite strong. Whereas the queenside pawn formation over here, if the centermost pawn on b6 falls, then the other two pawns will most likely fall as well. So it is incredibly weak. Now rook to e1, excellent move. This is the best way to deal with the bishop to a6 threat. Pushing the pawn to c4 would have also dealt with the bishop to a6 threat, but would have made it very difficult to attack the b6 pawn by blocking access to both the c4 and the b5 squares. Rook to a7. That's probably not objectively the best move. Positionally, it would have been a very good idea to play b5, as it makes the queenside pawns much stronger. Also, if Fischer can get in a4 before black plays b5, then both the b6 pawn and the b5 square will become long-term weaknesses. Now, normally, offering a queen trade would be a very good move since it would decrease white's attacking potential on the king side. But because of the weakness in these pawns on the queen side, and because white can play a4 on the next move, it is not a good idea to trade off the queens. White will be able to fix these pawns on the queen side, and also, in the endgame, the pawns become much weaker, and they will be easier to attack. Bishop to f1, great idea. White is trading off the light-squared bishops in order to decrease black's control over both the c4 and the b5 squares. Now white can safely get a knight out to c4 and begin his attack on the b6 pawn. Bishop takes on e7. Fischer gladly trades off this bad bishop. Most of the pawns on the board are on the same color as the bishop, which greatly limits its mobility. The same can be said for black's bishop. Black's bishop needs at least 4 moves to get over to the queen side to defend the b6 pawn. This makes it very difficult for black to defend both the queenside pawns and the kingside pawns. Rook to b3, great idea. Fischer is decreasing black's control over the d-file by forcing one of his rooks to come to the defense of the b6 pawn. Fischer seeks to create a second weakness on the king side. His opponent can defend indefinitely against one weakness, but not against two. Fischer has found the second weakness, the h6 pawn. It cannot be defended by any pawns and must be defended by a piece. By defending it with the bishop, black is now giving up control over the f6 square. This allows white, through tactical means, to win a pawn on a5. If the knight is captured, then this is a forced checkmate. Therefore, the knight cannot be captured. And here white is setting up a checkmate threat in order to keep black's rook in check and avoid him, or rather prevent him from capturing the pawn on a4. So white is indirectly defending the pawn on a4. If black were to play a move like rook to a6, then rook to d3 check, and at the very least black is going to lose a lot of material and possibly even be checkmated. So therefore, instead of playing rook to a6, rook to c7 is played to give the king some shelter from the checks. b4, excellent move. After b4, black resigned, as he has to give up at least a rook to avoid checkmate. If black were to play a move like king to e4, for example, simply check, king to d3, and rook to c5 checkmate is threatened. Black has to play a silly move like rook to a5 and drop at least a rook to avoid the checkmate. In addition, if black were to play a move like c takes on b3, then king d3 threatens checkmate in one move. Therefore, black must also give up the rook to avoid that checkmate. Therefore, after b4, Grandmaster Durao resigned. So it is very, very important to remember in chess that you never want this type of pawn triangle formation. It is incredibly weak. The b5 square is weak, and also the b6 pawn is weak. And if you get a chance, play b5 and just get rid of that weakness before your opponent has a chance to play a4 and create a bind on those squares and prevent you from getting rid of that weakness. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for some more great videos.